we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Mary Ruth Cohenauer, and I am the Division Director of the Market Development Division here at Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. I see many familiar faces and names, and it's very exciting to see a lot of names we don't know. So I'm going to give you a little bit of logistics and an intro, and then I will introduce my colleagues that will be helping today. You are here for a very exciting announcement of the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant Program. This is a cooperative agreement with the USDA, which means they are going to help us along the way. And as many of you know, that doesn't always move as fast as possible, but we have some great guidance and some help from our federal partners to do this. This is a competitive grant process. You're going to hear much more about that as we go along. Just a few housekeeping items, as I know this is not your first Zoom. We would like for you to keep your microphones muted unless you are asking a question. We did want to keep this open because the bulk of this will be questions today. We're going to be offering at least 3 different question opportunities after sections that we talk about today. So that means if you wouldn't mind holding your question to the end of the section, and we will call on you either with a hand raise, if you know how to use that little button, a question in the chat, which is being monitored, or if you can get a word in edgewise, you can just yell it out and we'll try to figure it out. So as we move along today, keep those questions written down. We will try to do those in sections that make sense. And at the end, we'll open it up for all the questions that didn't get answered. And through this process that we have been working more than 6 months now to get this agreement lined out with the federal government, we know there's a lot of questions that we actually probably can't answer today. So there might be a few times where we have to say, we're going to get back with you. We'll take your contact information and contact you directly for that. As we get started, right before I turn it over to my colleagues here, this is middle of the supply chain. And I hope you've all read that definition. We're going to talk a lot more about that, but that is anything food related that is not being harvested out of the ground, out of wherever you're planting that, and not being sold on a retail shelf, except meat and seafood. So unfortunately, I will have to say, if you are on here in a meat processor or dealing with anything meat related today, we can't help you out. There are many great federal grant programs. Some of you may have been able to take advantage of our state CARES Act project a few years ago. Unfortunately, this program cannot handle anything dealing with meat. So the other thing you're going to hear about today is the 2 versions of the application that we have out: equipment only grants and then infrastructure grants. So we're going to get in a whole lot of that later. But the first thing we're going to address is eligibility. Who is actually eligible for this? And after Jason Harvey, my colleague and our grants coordinator, who many of you have already talked to, has talked about all of the eligibility projects and applicant-wise, we will open a question dealing with eligibility only. So if we get questions that deal with some other sections we haven't covered yet, we may ask that you hold that question, or we'll come back to you. Emily Ague, my other colleague, is monitoring the chat. So if you feel more comfortable throwing questions up there, or if you need the links that you don't have those, we know that has been a fun adventure on our website, trying to download these forms that come from the federal government. You will be very happy when you do download those forms because they are very easy to work with. They're just not the easiest to download. So they're dynamic forms. So with that, I will turn it over to Jason Harvey to talk a little bit about who and what is eligible for this program.
Thank you, Mary Ruth. Again, as she said, my name is Jason Harvey. I am the person that many of you probably have talked to or will be talking to probably in the future. I will be administering this program, and kind of excited to see what all benefits and all the positives that it will bring to our state and our ag industry. So I will also kind of touch on this. We are recording this, and we'll try and get it posted. So if there's something that we talk about and you're trying to remember what did they actually say, in 2 or 3 days, we will try and have this posted where you could go back and view this meeting. So kind of touching off on eligibility of kind of who and what are eligible. So kind of the program is intended to support the food system crops and products meant for human consumption. So we cannot have projects that are looking at fiber or pet foods. It has to be items meant for human consumption. And as Mary Ruth talked about, kind of middle of the supply chain. So that's kind of an awkward or weird phrase that is like, what are they actually talking about with middle of the supply chain? Is, as she said, it's meant for anything that takes place after production of an agricultural product and before the product is actually sold to consumers. And kind of the example that I've been giving to folks of, if you could invent or a tomato, using a tomato. So anything that happens from taking that seed and planting it in either the ground or wherever it will be planted to the growing, that is not eligible. Once you have taken that tomato off of the vine, that is the start of middle of the supply chain. So whether that be a project to go in to use a washing and packing station for that tomato, or cold storage to store it, or freezer or kind of freezer trucks or for transportation, or if you're needing to then put in a commercial kitchen to then turn that tomato into a salsa, a sauce, anything that would be value added with that tomato would be something that is eligible before then it enters that either grocery store or a restaurant for consumers to purchase. So just kind of using a tomato there as an example, but hopefully that would give a little bit of an idea of what it is and kind of what that middle of the supply chain looks like. So entities, who is eligible? So any agricultural producer or processor or groups of agricultural producers and processors are eligible. Nonprofit organizations, for-profit entities, local government entities, tribal governments who are operating middle of the supply chain activities such as processing, aggregation, distribution of agricultural products are eligible for this. Institutions such as schools and universities or hospitals who bring products together to establish a cooperative or shared infrastructure for equipment that will benefit multiple producers who are in middle of the supply chain. What type of products are eligible? Where Ruth we'll kind of talk about what is eligible, and then we'll talk about what is not eligible here. So what type of projects? Any type of projects that are looking at upgrades or new facilities for processing agricultural products, such as on-farm, post-harvest processing, preservation, cold storage, post-harvest cleaning and grading, purchasing of freezer equipment or freezer or cold storage, processing, canning, preserving, pasteurization, any type of preparation or packaging, cooking, baking, juicing, or distilling and fermenting. All of those are items that would be considered eligible and for projects. Purchasing special purpose equipment that would go for the processing of these items. Planning for HACCP or other food safety or worker safety measures or equipment recommendations. So training could be used for this. Analyzing potential facility upgrades and changes that meet regulatory requirements. So if you're having to do, any type of analysis of for building a new facility, could be there, or hiring kind of term limited personnel to assist with the project implementation. So we wouldn't be able to hire somebody that is a permanent employee for multiple years. But if you were having to hire somebody to oversee a project, then that would be something that could be eligible for this. So what type of projects are not eligible? Acquiring land or building. So we cannot use grant funding to go out and purchase land or purchase a building. I think I see something that was just answered there in the chat, but any type of a project dealing with meat and poultry are not eligible. So even though I think the wording from USDA might have said processing, it goes further than processing. So if you were just wanting to get freezer space to then store your meat that had been processed before it is sold, that would not be eligible. Or if you were, say, a beef jerky company that would just wanting to put in a dehydrator or smoker to then to make jerky, even though that wouldn't necessarily look at it as technically processing. Under USDA, we've talked several times, anything dealing with meat and or poultry is not eligible. And the reasoning is that they have had several grant programs in the past that have touched the meat and poultry segments, and they're trying to get the money spread out across the ag industry and sectors as best they can. Also, another thing, it would be any type of processing activities of where the product that is being processed is looking at the medical marijuana industry. So any type of, even though it is legal in the state of Oklahoma, it is still not on a federal level. And so therefore, with this being federal monies, those projects are not eligible for RFSI funds. So I think we can kind of stop here with going over eligibility. I know that was fairly quick, and if anybody has any questions, I see one here in the chat of asking about honey. Yes, honey is eligible for RFSI funding.
I'm curious if bone broth is eligible, since it's since you said meat is not.
Nikki, that it would be a very good question. I don't know if, Mary Ruth, have you heard that addressed in some of our calls with USDA? That's probably one that we're going to need to check on. I don't know. That's kind of a unique one that I could see either side of the coin on that. But let us get an answer for you, and we can get that back to you.
Thank you.
I see one in the chat about baked goods that includes meat derived products. Just because it's a meat animal doesn't mean that is meat. So they're actually talking about harvested meat when they talk about that. So buttermilk, eggs are technically eligible, correct, Jason?
Eggs would be eligible. It's just the I think poultry, the actual, I guess, chicken itself.
Meat bird.
Yeah, meat bird.
So Jason, this is Jeanette Lombardo with the Farmer Veteran Coalition. We have a chapter there in Oklahoma, and I wanted to ask about the distribution of targeted ag products. We do distribution through an online program. So we have our label. It's our Homegrown by Heroes label. those certified growers can go online and sell their products. Would that be considered distribution to support that program?
That is a retail outlet, and retail is not included in middle of the supply chain.
It's not a retail outlet. It's,
They're not selling their products.
well, okay, they're selling it from their own cart, their web page. It's not
That's
a
considered
retail.
retail.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
We do have another question in the chat. Would a facility need to be acquired before submitting the application?
I don't know if it would need to be technically, because I mean, you could technically use RFSI funding for building new facilities. I think that whenever you're looking at the competitiveness, whenever we get down to the review area, that I don't know. I'm not going to be a reviewer, but just trying to put myself in a reviewer's shoes there of looking at, is this something, if it is not already purchased at the time of application and reviewing, then does it score as high compared to others? And so I think that would just be something that you would need to look at, and we would definitely not be able to use grant funds for the acquisition of that business.
But it could build something on property already owned.
Yes.
Farm gate sales question, that is retail. So middle of the supply chain, again, that definition is on the website and it is hard to kind of understand, but planting of crops and the selling of the things are not middle of the supply chain. Distribution maybe is a little gray because that is selling product, but the moving of product, that kind of thing is not considered the retail shelf. So farm gate sales are not eligible. Now, if the middle of the supply chain on your farm means that you need cold storage or that you need a wash and pack facility, those are middle of the supply chain. But retail shelves, POS units, things like that would not be eligible.
Mr. Jason, my name is Simon Billy, and I live in Worcester, Oklahoma. We have a food pantry with our church. We give out to about 500 people, approximately 200 families a month. Would we qualify, or would that be eligible?
As a church dealing as a food pantry.
Yes, distribution only, of course. We give it out because we are USDA inspected, but it's just distributed through the church. We buy it through a food bank from the church funds, and of course we distribute it out through the community twice a month.
I mean, that is one where I think we probably need to check on that. I mean, I think it probably could qualify. I think that, the premise of the USDA grant here is to assist companies with distribution of trying to increase economics and sales of Oklahoma products, where I think this project here is one would be a little bit different, to where you're already purchasing the product and it's just being distributed to those families in need. So I think that is one that is a little bit kind of different in nature. I don't know if it makes it ineligible. I don't know, kind of going back to that comment of in the review process of, where a reviewer is going to view that as, as worthy as one that's, generating revenue for another, Oklahoma entity or not. But that's something, Simon, we can definitely double check and make sure is the eligibility, for that.
Thank you very much.
Simon, if you don't mind putting your email in the chat, we'll make sure to contact you directly when we get that answer.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Same for, I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't remember who asked the bone broth question.
It was,
Did
I
you
think,
get that?
Nikki.
Okay, great.
We do have a couple of more questions in the chat. Can the funds be used to lease a building? If you haven't leased it yet, how does that relate to the evidence of critical infrastructure document?
As far as leasing the building, I know we can use the money to lease equipment, but as far as the building goes, I'm thinking that is along the same lines as real property, as being able to with land and all. I'm thinking that what they're looking at is more of leasing of equipment rather than the leasing of an actual building. Mary Ruth, have you heard anything different on our office hours?
No, but Jenna, we can clarify that and give you a call about that. I believe it has to do with the duration of the grant funding. And so I'm going to write that down to clarify for you. Jovan,
go ahead.
Jovan, I see that you have a question. How long does the review process take after submitting an application? This is a wonderful question, and I would love to be able to answer you perfectly. But as I mentioned earlier, we're on a cooperative agreement with the federal government. So as you have seen, our deadline is in February. We do our diligence to very quickly review these, and then they're submitted to the federal government for approval. We are hoping very much that is a quick process. All 50 states are in this with us with their separate grant projects. So this could take a while. We are expecting no sooner than August would funds be able to be distributed. We would hope that you would be notified much earlier than that if you were a recipient or if you were submitted to the federal government. Unfortunately, this is not a fast process. Any other questions about eligibility before we move on to some little more complicated things about this?
Okay, we just had a question pop up here in the chat. The purchase of bees would not be, that is on the production side of honey. Beekeeping equipment would be on the production side and not eligible. It has to start at the honey process. So anything honey related after that honey has been essentially harvested or taken from the hives would be the start of middle of the supply chain. Let's say, Emily, if I missed.
I see William has a question. They have applied the Young Farmer Grant. That is a completely separate program and would not necessarily affect you applying for this grant. What will the competitive criteria be for evaluation? We should have a rubric available. You got to remember this is economic development, so it's going to be the application that Jason is going to go through later on in this program will really show you what they're looking for. So economic development will be heavily graded in this, but we don't have that available for you at this time as far as the actual rubric. So let the application be your guide there. If the application asks the question, it will be graded heavily. And impact as far as the more people you can impact, employees or consumers or communities, that kind of thing will be a big part of the grading.
Jason, we do have another one in the chat. If you are building and start the building before you get approval, can you be reimbursed?
Tell you what, there's another one. Let's skip that one because that is a perfect lead into our next section. So Charla, I apologize. I'm going to put that one on hold. Let me answer Bob's, and then we're going to use her as a perfect lead in to my next section here. Bob asked, we grow 80% and buy 20% of the product. That is perfectly fine. I mean, if you were just a co-packer that is not, your sole purpose is taking and making products out of items that you don't grow, that is completely eligible. So it does not matter, if you grow 100% or 0% of it. If you're processing it, then that is eligible. Let's move on. I said that I would address Charlotte's question here. It was about, let me talk about the match on requirements, and then I will answer her question. So as many of you have probably looked at and noticed, there are some matching requirements with this grant. With the equipment only grants, there is not a match that is required. So it is one that it is just the grant itself. There's no match. One thing we did not touch on and can, the equipment only grants are a minimum of $10,000 up to $100,000. The infrastructure grants, minimum $100,000 up to $1 million. And some of you may look through USDA. That was an actual, it could have been up to $3 million. But whenever we were meeting with our stakeholders here in the state and putting all this together, our feedback was lowering that maximum amount down to $1 million. That way we could impact and fund more projects and do more good with the money than just helping just a handful of large dollar amounts. So with the infrastructure grants, they do require a match. So off the top, they do require a 50% match of the total project cost. And unless there's always a unless there with USDA, unless you can meet or fall into one of the following categories. If you fall into one of these categories, that match gets lowered down to a 25% match of the total project cost. So if you are a historically underserved farmer or rancher, or for other businesses that qualify under the SBA categories of a small disadvantaged business or farmer, a woman-owned small business, a veteran-owned small business. I think there may be one other one that is on the application there. If you fall within any of those categories, then that match gets lowered to a 25% match. With this, USDA in their applications have said you have to self-certify. And so if you have looked, and we'll go over it here later in the application, there is a box that you check that says I fall in as one of these categories. And what I have told people, I am going to be way too busy, and so is USDA dealing with the review and administration to come check to make sure that that if you say that you are that's a woman-owned business, that that, 51% of the ownership is a female, or if you fall under a Native American, we're not going to come and check. We are going to go off of the portion where you self-certify that you fall in those categories. So dealing with match, that can either be cash, where you are matching that with your own cash funds. You are also able to use in kind as part of a match, and that could be if say that you were having to utilize a staff member to oversee or to put to do work that is outside of their normal day-to-day responsibilities, then that could be something that you could utilize their time towards a in-kind portion of the match. Also, one of the things I don't have written down here, but indirect cost. So applicants are able to, on the infrastructure grants, are able to receive indirect cost. And if you have a NICRA with the federal government, that kind of a negotiated indirect cost, can't remember what the RNA stands for there, but if you have a negotiated agreement for indirect cost, you would need to provide that with your application. So let's say that that it is a 15%, you would have to be able to provide that. Otherwise, that gets lowered down to a 10% de minimis indirect cost. So if you are only want to take, let's say 5% indirect cost, you are then able to use that other 5% as part of your match. So if you do not take all of your indirect costs that is available to you, you are able to use that as a portion of your match. Now, circling back to Charlotte's question of, I know we've had this. What if you have just done some either construction or bought a piece of equipment, let's say within the last month or two, and can I use that as a grant eligible purchase? Unfortunately, you are not able to use, we're not able to reimburse you on any purchases that have taken place prior to an agreement or that we have with you. So if it has happened prior to us reviewing and approving your application and it going forward, we cannot accept that as and reimburse you with cash funds for that. One thing that we are able to do, though, is utilize those as part of, you are able to use that as part of your match. So if you did, say, purchase a piece of equipment, you could then show that as part of your match. So that tries to help a little bit with offsetting that. So I think that that kind of covers a little bit of the matching requirements.